So this is a great example of Rev.John Parkinson's fashion taste, because what we have here is a purple and black striped velvet, but in the black stripe, which is the velvet element, there are actual stars stamped out of the velvet, like it's an incredible piece of fabric. And this has a matching pair of breeches, so this would have been a suit, and he would have worn a complementary waistcoat with it. But just some of the fashion details on this, we have the same element as the rest of the collection. We have these sort of very standard plain cuffs with the 3 buttons. This one has a little bit more of an overhang, but there seems to wax and wane with how much is overhang. That doesn't seem to be a constant timeline. It just seems to be whatever the tailor made, but we do have a bit more of an overhang on this. We also have the plain stand collar. This one again is a bit shorter, and there does seem to be a trend in the later coats of being just a little bit of a shorter collar, which is interesting because give it another 8 years, 5 years, the collar is really going to grow. So it's interesting that we have a shorter collar at this earlier part of the 1790s. And again, we have the plain pocket. So we've just got a plain flap shaped in a very similar way, no button decoration, and just the 3 placed buttons. Quite a lot of other fashionable coats from the 1790s, for example, lose even the buttons because they're no longer needed, but this still has the buttons. So essentially, the main sort of details of this coat look exactly the same as the others from the collection. But this is a great example of the pattern cutting changing. So I don't know if you can see, but the curved nature of this front has moved from being generically curved to having a much more bulbous kind of dome there, and that's very 1790s, this sort of puffed chest. We also moved from having, rather than having buttons decorate the whole of the front, we just have a much more smaller amount of buttons in the area where the buttons are needed. So we just have 4 here, whereas on the earlier coats they still have the buttons, but only the top few have got holes in them, so only the top few are functioning, but the rest are still in. But not with this later style, you just begin to get fewer buttons. So again, even though the essential fashion details look very samey and very similar, you begin to see evidence of this later style. And if I just open him up, here we have the inside vents, and this looks exactly the same construction. You still have the same number of pleats as the earlier coats. You still got the same amount of inner folds, but what has really changed is that the depth of the pleat has become much shallower, and it's much less flared, it's a much straighter line. So yeah. Making techniques. This one doesn't have that top stitching line, and it doesn't have the stitching around the neck. And like I say, some of them do and some of them don't. So that's just one of the sort of the making techniques that we're trying to follow. But yeah, he's a great example of 1790s fashion.